Hey guys, Janelle here with Blakely Interior Design, and we're here with episode number 2 of Design Dish, where we answer your design questions. Today's question comes from Leanne from Watch Hill, and she says, I'm redoing my living room and I want it to be fun and colorful, but I'm struggling with how to balance both color and pattern to create interest. I keep second guessing myself that everything I've chosen works together, which is getting me nowhere. Where do I go from here? Well, Leanne, I'm here to help. First of all, if you missed last week's episode number 1, definitely go back and check it out because we go into great detail about color there. So today we're going to focus on pattern. I'm going to walk you through how many patterns you should be using in the space, the scale of the pattern, because that has a huge impact on how everything plays together, the color and how they coordinate with one another, as well as the lines, which is going to give you a harmonious room with a lot of interest that's not overdone. So let's start with how many patterns to use in a room. The first thing you want to think about is having at least 3 patterns. One could be a solid, and you could have a large scale and a small scale. That's kind of the basic minimum. You could also look at having a third pattern plus a solid. So you could have a large scale, a mid scale, and a small scale plus a solid. There's a lot of variations within that, but that's the basic rule of thumb. So let's take a look at a large scale pattern. So for example, let's use this one. This is a large scale pattern. We could pair that with a small scale pattern, which is sort of a stripe. It brings in the orange that's in this, and then we could pair it with a solid. This is a very basic kind of pattern combination that works really, really well. If we wanted to get a little bit more interesting, we could also bring in another mid-scale pattern. So let's put this one down for a second. And this one, as you can see, is about 50% of the scale of our first pattern. So this would be large, this would be mid-scale, this would be our small scale pattern, and then we have our solid. So that's a nice combination of pattern right there. Another way to create a little bit more interest, and this is getting a little daring, but you could also bring in something that has sinuous lines that's sort of in between all of them that cuts it up a little bit. So these are more geometric, and this is a little bit more sinuous. So that's going to go into the form and lines of the patterns that we're using so that you want everything to feel a little bit more harmonious. This is a little bit more organic. Let me open it up for you. And this is a little bit more geometric. So that's why that works, okay? So let's look at the color combinations. One thing to keep in mind is this is got a pretty creamy white background, but it's fairly white. I really love this pattern with this large scale floral, but what bothers me about it is that it's too yellow. The background of this pattern, of this fabric, is too yellow to pair with this. It just looks off to me. I don't know if you can see that from the camera, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't make the cut in my book. So that's why that doesn't work. If the background of this was more white, totally would work, okay? I'm gonna put that aside and explain a little bit more about the color. We bring in a pattern. I love using fabrics that have multiple colors because they're easy to play off of. This one has a blue, it's got a light aqua, it's got a little bit of an orangey red in it, as well as some grays and navy blue. So there's a ton to play off in here. If you're thinking about what we talked about last week in terms of color, there's the 60-30-10 rule. You can sort of play that into your selection, your color selection of the patterns you're choosing, but keep in mind you really want to think about the room as a whole. So let's go back to this for a second. When you're looking at this, let me fold them up, it's a little easier for you to see. When you think about this combination here, there's a combination of navy and orange, and you might ask, is this the 60? The orange the 60 or is the blue the 60? And I think it really depends on what you're doing in the room. So, you can go back to last week's episode to check that out, but that's a way to look at how the color is used within the patterns. The other thing to keep in mind is, let's say we use this that has a few different colors. We bring in a solid, and then we bring in this really cute small scale that plays off of the orangey red that's in this as well. You could also bring in something like this that has no connection to this at all in terms of the color, but it totally works because when you pair it with this, it's the one that makes them work together. So hopefully that makes sense to you. The other thing to keep in mind are the sinuous patterns and lines within the fabric or pattern as a whole. If you're doing wallpaper, this would apply as well. So let's look at this. This is geometric. It's a pretty pattern. Let's not think too much about color right now, but the form and the lines within the pattern. I would not pair this with this because the lines compete with each other. Your eyes, it's not something that is relaxing to your eye. There's too many lines going in various directions, and they're kind of the same scale anyway, so that would not work. However, if you were to take something that was like this, again, let's not look at color right now, but more so the lines within the patterns, that totally works. The scale helps a great deal as well. But the circles within this really help soften and counterbalance all the linear lines within this fabric. So to recap, we want to make sure we have various patterns within a space. You want at least 3, a large scale, a small scale, and a solid. And you can add in a couple more to make sure that there is a lot of interest, but make sure that they're varying in their scale. You want to make sure that there's a great color combination and at least one pattern that brings the color combination together. And you want to look at the lines within the space. So if it's too angular, bring in some circular or sinuous lines to break that up a little bit and create more balance, and vice versa. So if you follow those simple rules, I think that you're going to be off to a great start in creating a very harmonious and interesting space that represents your style. And don't be afraid to use pattern. It's really not difficult. Play around with it a little bit because I do that myself. Sometimes I'll throw things around, and when we design, we really put things together, we move them around, and sometimes you don't really know what you're gonna like until you see it next to each other. So don't be afraid to buy some extra pillows and start playing around with it, and you're gonna get a sense of it, of what feels right for you. But if you keep those basic rules in mind, you're off to a great start, okay? Thanks so much. That concludes our second episode of Design Dish. And we look forward to hearing your questions, so definitely submit them on social media, and we look forward to seeing you next time.